Welcome to Barrier Breakers, a podcast celebrating resilience and triumph over adversities. Expect raw, honest conversations filled with practical advice and life lessons. Now on to today's episode. Welcome back to episode 10 of Barrier Breakers.
10 episodes.
10 episodes in a dime.
Let's
Good job,
go.
friend. We have overcome so much adversity just to get here.
Just to get here. Just to do it.
Just to do it, from the painting,
hanging curtains.
To the rug was too small.
The rug was too small.
The chairs were uncomfortable.
The backdrop was doing
Flowing in the wind.
one of those things.
The sign is still too little.
It's
but
fine.
it's cute. It's cute.
It's cute. It works.
It works. To the scheduling conflicts. If you guys don't know, Gentry does not actually live in Knoxville, Tennessee. Yet. You commute here. You're dedicated to this, and I love you for it. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
Me too.
Today is the tale of Miss Norita Cruz. We are excited to have you in the studio with us.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here, and I love the story of breaking barriers. So many of us have adversity, and by sharing our story, we help someone else who's in our shoes.
Let's get right in
years
it.
ago.
Let's do it.
She gets it. I know.
I'm so excited.
Let's go. So, like we told all the guests before you, we do not come on to set with any preconceived notions, questions drawn up.
Nope.
We truly just want to hear about you, hear your story, what makes you tick, your why, your passions, what you've had to overcome. And I did tell you this, we are going to always go back to your childhood.
Yep.
So tell us about your childhood. What was it like growing up?
So I am from a military family. My dad was active duty when I was born, and my parents moved around when I was little. I was born in Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy. And when
Aim high, let's go.
And I'm not quite sure how old I was exactly, but my dad got stationed in Panama doing the cleanup in the early 90s, and we had to move there. So I've been doing a whole lot of growth and healing over the past few years. So I've been doing a lot of reflection in the past few months, and it's been really wild just to see all the places I've been, all the things that have gone on to get me to here. When my dad was stationed in Panama, my mom she stayed behind for a little while, and eventually we moved there. So in Panama, my first sibling was born, and we lived there for a little while. And there's so many different things that are, like you have language differences, you have societal differences.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I was, like this young little kid. All of the people around me that I had experienced were like military members.
Yeah.
And so clean shaven. And so there's just so many different cultural dynamics.
That's crazy.
So, in Panama, on base, you have military people, and then you have civilian contractors. So I had only ever seen well-groomed people and wasn't really exposed to very much. But then, we go to a public library, and there is a man with long hair and a mustache. And for me,
yeah,
only men ever had mustaches, and only women ever had long hair. And so I, being my innocent little naive self, I was like 2 or 3. It's like, why does that lady have a mustache? and there's, and even just linguistics, culturally, the way that people prepared their meals. We're living on base. We had people working on base that were coming from out in town. And then you go out in town and you get to explore, and there's just fragments of memories from being that young. But I remember riding in a Jeep through the Panamanian rainforest and seeing monkeys and stuff playing. And that's just, little kid from Colorado, you don't see those things. That's movie things. But moving back from there is really when a lot of the trauma and adversity started. Once my mom and dad moved back from Panama, they got divorced. And so there was just so much tumultuous stuff. I think I was 4. So it was all very quick. And there's just just lately, I've re-listened to the book "The Body Keeps the Score."
Mm-hmm.
If
A friend of mine recommended
yeah.
that to me.
if
Shout out Rachel. She listens. I know. Shout out to my neighbor Rachel.
yeah, it's a book about trauma, how it's stored in the body, and how when we experience traumatic events, that it's hard for our bodies to realize that we're safe and to integrate that experience and be able to heal and come out the other side without it affecting us all the time. And so listening to that book, it's like they did these studies on adverse childhood experiences. They call it like ACE study.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like if your parents have been divorced, if you've moved, if you've experienced any physical trauma, if you've experienced neglect, if you've seen somebody being treated in those ways that are harmful, if you've witnessed violence, experienced, a traumatic loss of the house or a loss of a family member. And so going through, it's like, I didn't realize I had trauma
Sure.
until I was an adult, because when you're in it, especially for childhood things, you just grow up and that's your normal.
Yeah.
And
There's no
you
way of
don't-
identifying it because that's your, like you
Yeah.
said, it's what you're used to.
And it's not until you're exposed to other ideas and
Or-
beliefs and choices and options that
Yeah.
you're like, oh, wow, not everyone else has that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For sure.
So tell us about that trauma you encountered after your parents got divorced.
So there were several things. Divorce itself is a really hard thing. I mean, you have these two people that had made a commitment to each other, and for whatever the reasons are, they were unable to uphold that commitment. And it just hurts everybody around them. So I was hurt. My parents fought a lot. My mom was unfaithful, and that was not the first time. I later learned that she also had a very traumatic upbringing.
Yeah.
And so, hindsight, you can see the patterns and the behaviors and things. But for me, a little kid, I was like, I didn't know why my dad wasn't living with us. I already knew before that he had to go away. And so anytime you have that separation of the child from the parent, that's traumatic, regardless of the circumstances.
Yeah.
And so there's like all these things. We moved towns. My dad stayed in the Air Force. He was in the Guard at the time, was also going to school and became a volunteer sheriff and stuff. And it was really weird because he had this really like strict, rigid life, but all of the basic needs were met. So like somewhere to live, food, and some sort of income. And then with my mom, it was such an opposite.
Yes.
We were so poor. Shortly after they got divorced, she got pregnant with my sister. And from that, there was more trauma because my mom was the other woman in that situation. And just the things that we heard from, the biological father of my sister, his partner obviously was less than thrilled to find out that
Yes.
there was another child coming into the world. And so then there were threats and other things. And so it was like this tumultuous experience. And in an effort to try to make ends meet and not atone for my mom's past, but to, with her own childhood trauma, her biological father was imprisoned for incest and abuse related things. So there's a whole family history of
there's some
of
curses
struggles.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and those generational things that lead to that trauma it's so hard. And so she was like a young single mom with 2 kids already, third one coming on the way. She decided that she would open up her home and become a foster parent. And so with that, in some ways, it was great, but in the early 90s, the system, in any foster care system, anytime a child is removed from their parent, it doesn't matter. It is traumatic for the child.
Absolutely.
whether it's filled with the best intentions or not. Like it's still so hard. So now, not only were we all struggling, me and my brother were away from our dad. We had a new little sister coming into the world, and there was all this like turmoil all the time.
Constant change.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then you have like foster siblings coming in. And at first we were just like a short-term visit, like respite care.
Respite care. Yeah.
So, someone just needs, they need a weekend or there's something going on, some situations where the child is not allowed to travel outside of the state or whatever. So we would, have these foster siblings rotating in and out. And we had a couple long-term placements. Every single foster sister that I had experienced assault and abuse. And even most foster brothers also experienced it. And so then you get this, you get these children who are brought up in these environments that are just so traumatic.
Mm-hmm.
And they learn these behaviors and they learn coping mechanisms and other things. And they come into your house and they are, they're bringing their whole background and experience with them.
Their reflection of what their experiences are.
Yeah. And so then, in turn, hurt people. Well, when children are abused, oftentimes they reenact those behaviors and things.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I learn about traumatic memories and other things, I've experienced my own nightmares. I've had so many negative encounters. And it's like, as an adult, I can reflect and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe my foster sister experienced those things. I can't believe my foster brother experienced those things. And at the same time, I can still like reflect and acknowledge like it's okay that I was so hurt by their behaviors because that shouldn't have happened to me.
Yes.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it shouldn't have happened to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just shapes everything. And when I was about 6 years old, I learned what I don't know what words, like if you guys
Oh no,
don't
you're
say any
fine. Hey,
words or
be raw.
anything.
It's okay. This is not sponsored by any.
Yeah. Okay.
We love the Lord here, and Brittany has a potty mouth. If you have not seen that side of me, just know that it's okay.
I had one foster sibling who there were restraining orders on her stepfather. They had been removed from the homes multiple times. They would have to go back for visits. She had like other siblings that were in different homes.
Mm-hmm.
And they were supposed to go back home for weekend visitations and stuff. But her stepfather was molesting and raping her when she was going home for these. And my mom had told me at one point, she's like, if anyone ever tells you that an adult does things, touching private parts and stuff, like you need to let someone know. And my foster sister begged and begged, like not to tell anything. But at the time, like before I had that
6.
explicit, I was like 4, 5, 6-ish. But before I had that explicit knowledge that, these are your privates, nobody's supposed to be touching them, especially like adults shouldn't be. But I had already been assaulted and forced to do acts that I shouldn't have been doing
Mm-hmm.
at that age at the hands of foster siblings. And so like when I realized that these things were not supposed to be happening, I was able to speak up. But at that point, like I was already slightly broken.
Yeah.
And you guys talk about faith and that's something that I typically try to steer clear of.
Mm-hmm.
But in our society, Christianity is the main focus. And around puberty, when everyone is always talking about purity and everything, it's like, well, mine was already gone a decade ago.
Sorry. So I know that you listen to the podcast, and thank God for women like our mothers. My mom and her sisters were sexually assaulted. They were molested by men in their lives, and they told my grandmother. How she handled it was her generation. My mom told me that if anything were to ever happen, to tell her because her mom didn't listen and remove them from the situation. Well, I can recall when I was 4, our early childhood memories are just, sometimes we don't really remember things, or we remember them differently. And looking back now, I'm like, something happened with my stepfather, who was this deacon in a church, where I know there was a situation where he was in the wrong about some stuff. And when I was old enough to remember, I was 9, and this man had the audacity to do it to me and my middle sister laying together. It was a thunderstorm. The power went out. We had a water bed. My mom and baby sister were at the top of the bed, and me and my middle sister, who were not his kids, were like next to him. And to feel him molest me, and then his hand go over to my middle sister, and he gets up and goes to wash his hands. As soon as he goes to the bathroom, I tell my mother she might have made some mistakes in her life. We were immediately removed from the home. The police came, and my mom was hell-bent on protecting her daughters. So I'm so happy that your mom told you that that was not normal, because some people don't. It's swept under the rug. And I don't know if this happens across the country, but I feel like in the South especially, I know you weren't here, but we don't talk about stuff that's so taboo. And I'm sorry that happened to you. And I'm sorry it happened to your foster siblings. It's very unfortunate. It still happens to people in this country and across the world. And yet I truly wholeheartedly appreciate the people that stand up and protect kids in that moment.
Thank you for sharing.
And it's hard too, because like I know my mom did all those things with the best intentions.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are just things that that are beyond what they know. And looking back, it's like, oh man, there's so many things wish were different.
Yeah.
But if wishes were, you could fill up a hand with wishes and still be stuck exactly where you are. And it was really hard. But one of my foster siblings, she shared about the abuse. And as a 6-year-old, I went to testify in court against a grown man. And I was all prepared. The sheriff had talked to me about it ahead of time. Child workers had talked to me about it. I had to answer so many questions. And we got to the courthouse, and before I was even able to give my testimony on behalf of my foster sibling, he pleaded guilty and went to jail. And that was just the start of it. There was still so much trauma. I mentioned that my mom had a baby on the way, and the same foster sibling tried convincing me that that mothers were awful, and that my mother was awful, and the baby she was carrying was awful, and that they all needed to die. And so then it's it just unpacks more and more. And my mom didn't stay doing foster care very long. After she had my sister was born in 94. Mm-hmm. So I was 5. And
you were born in 89?
Mm-hmm.
I born in 89. My sister's 94 as well. So okay. Okay.
Yeah. And, eventually she got out of foster care because she started dating this man that was significantly older than her. He was 25 years older than her. And it wasn't until after they were married that, some of those secrets and behaviors and things come out. People put on one mask up front, but, so we hear the word narcissist a lot, but it's true, that manipulation, coercion, control, the power. There are just people that are just so deeply hurt and wounded that there's just no saving them. And so then, she got remarried. And then for that whole relationship, we were all just, there was just more and more trauma compounded onto it. Mm-hmm. So, by 7 years old, I had already been, had issues with foster brother, with foster sister, with another foster sister, and now my stepdad. And from my stepdad, my mom had 2 kids. So childhood was hard. We moved around a lot. My parents were divorced. There was always this weird dichotomy of like my dad's house that had all the basics.
Yeah.
He had an income. He had a home. He could keep it clean. He had like his executive function in order.
Mm-hmm.
And the expectations were so high, but also like the behaviors and things like there were issues there too. But so much of it was distance that as a child, it was like, oh, well, my dad's somewhere else. And here I am alone, like trying to fight all this stuff. It wasn't until I was in high school that my mom finally divorced him. I guess over all those years, he had never laid hands on her, but one night he did. And so then it's like she was working usually an hour away, if not more. You know, young mom. Now, at that point, she had 4 kids. My youngest sibling was born when I was in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of high school.
Yeah.
So I was already 14. I could have had my own kid at that time. And after that is when she finally like kicked him out. And she tried to get us into family counseling and other stuff, but it just felt so fake and forced.
Mm-hmm.
It was through a college program of, you know, like of PhDs or like psychology students. So all they would say is, well, how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? Well, I couldn't feel in my body.
Yeah.
I could dissociate. I could feel very sharp pain, and I could rarely feel like pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like, as a teenager, you turn to, you know, try to find the outlets and people that can help you be safe in a different environment. So for a long time, that was like sports, athletics. If I was involved with sports clubs or other programs at school, I could be at school and I didn't have to be at home. And then as I became a teenager and friends had access to things, like I started smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, every behavior that we turn to is serving some sort of problem. It's helping us meet some sort of need. Well, in our bodies, we have to be able to breathe and take deep breaths. But most people with trauma can't. But if you put a cigarette in their hand, all of a sudden they can inhale and exhale. And so it's like, oh, well, that helps. And it also gave like a social outlet. And then, you know, there's just so many things. Like I turned to drinking, and then in those, like with those substances, with those environments, with the people I was hanging around with, it's like, this is not good. In school, I did good enough to keep going and not really get in trouble and stay eligible for sports, but I was not a great student.
Like I was not a role model. Yeah.
No, and that was such a big juxtaposition from the younger version of me, who's very academically inclined. Like I skipped 5th grade. I was like, I knew too much that I was being a pain to my teachers. And so they moved me up. And so then it was like here's this really smart version of me. And here's this version that just is like trying to get by without being noticed. And as traumas piled on, you know, with substance, especially drinking, your inhibitions are lowered. Mm-hmm. And I would find that as when I was drinking, like I could feel things and I could let my body loose and I could dance a little easier and I could sing a little bit louder and I could laugh a little bit more without being worried that someone is going to like stare at my teeth.
Yeah.
But it all required another substance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I joined the military right out of high school because I was like, I have to get away from this. My parents were still divorced, and I had moved with my dad to end out my senior year. So the last 7 months of senior year, I moved to a new school because I told my mom, I was like, I cannot raise your kids.
Yeah.
I did not have any of these children. Before I left there, I was 16, responsible for getting my siblings to and from school, picking them up from Boys and Girls Club, feeding meals. Like my baby brother, when he was born, oftentimes my mom would be so exhausted getting home from working like a 12-hour shift or 20-hour shift. She was a manager of a truck stop. So managers, you're on salary, you get called in all the time.
Yeah.
So there I was, like a teenager in high school, struggling with all my own trauma, trying to help, like, oh, hear a baby cry in the night, let me go feed them. And I told my mom, I was like, I can't raise your kids. So I moved to my dad in May of 2006. I graduated high school. I turned 17. I got to conduct a band performance on my birthday, and I went to sign up for the Navy 4 days after my birthday.
Wow.
Signed up, graduated, and I was like, okay, let me get out of here. And even in the Navy, there's more trauma. So you have, hard working hours, people getting injured, shipmates being assaulted, experiencing your own traumas. And so just since like the whole experience is like, here's this compounding. Well, I moved to Knoxville in 2019, was struggling. My mental health, everything. I was having panic attacks all the time. My 3-year-old would do something and I would just lose it. There were moments where, during an intimate moment with my partner that I've been with for a decade, and I would have panic attacks like I was being assaulted again. And it's like this person, this like in the current reality, this is not what's happening.
Yeah.
But in my body, I couldn't feel the difference. Yeah. With my child, as she started approaching ages and doing things around the time of when my abuse started and my trauma started, it's like, oh. And so I've just spent the last few years unpacking those things, reading books, going through trauma therapy. I went through EMDR because I did talk therapy. I've done group therapies, anger management.
What is EMDR?
EMDR
Is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yep.
And it's, I guess the big idea of it is after a traumatic event, if you don't have attunement and someone, saying, or like if you don't have the language to explain what happened, the ability to understand why it happened, and then like the soothing to repair afterwards, things get jumbled up. And so in our bodies, those memories aren't processed and stored appropriately. After a traumatic event, if you're not sleeping, you're not getting the rest. And in neuroscience, they're saying like the REM sleep,
yes,
when your eyes are moving back and forth, that's helping all those bits and pieces to get compartmentalized and put together in a way that is helpful. Because there's so much information that we're processing all the time. We're filtering out so much that we don't
yes,
need.
we are. Yeah.
But with trauma, like that process is disrupted. So even like my executive function struggles. Trying to keep track of all the parts and pieces is hard. But even just like trying to sit and feel my body. Like I have restless legs and right now I just feel like I've been so empowered over the changes that I've made. Like before I would be sitting here all like jittery and
you look very comfortable.
Even sit still, but I couldn't sit and be in my own body. And so EMDR helped me. I had to learn how to be in the moment. So they practice like mindfulness and just like figuring out like what can you touch and feel? Yeah. What can you see in your environment? And being able to realize that because of all the different layers of trauma that I've experienced, my function is different. I don't function like the other people. And then it's like you look back and it's like, okay, by the time I had my daughter, I was in college, and a couple of years, like when I was in college, I got custody of my youngest brother, and that was a trauma. And so that was wild. Right after the Navy, my mom died, and my siblings were all, right after I joined the Navy, she died. And
how did she pass away?
She was killed in a car accident.
I'm so sorry.
And my youngest sibling was in the back of her vehicle. He had to get like jaws of life removed and flight for life to Denver. And so it's like there's just all these things that pile and pile and pile. And it got to a point that I was like, I can't even function. I can't breathe. I can't enjoy my child having an innocent moment. I can't enjoy a pleasurable experience without everything being tainted.
Yeah.
And EMDR really helped me to be able to process through those things and then reintegrate and say, like, yeah, when when you were a child and you couldn't stand up to a 300-pound grown man.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yet I still tried to help protect my siblings. I still tried, to do as much as I could to relieve the tensions and stuff. And it's like, no matter what I did as a child, it was not enough.
Mm-hmm.
But processing those memories is like, wow, look at that child that, when her voice was silenced, she still spoke up for someone else. When someone else was being hurt, she still spoke up for them. And it's like coming to Tennessee, we started over from scratch. We cut ties with a lot of toxic negativity.
Good for you.
We developed our life in a way that we could be present. In one of the episodes, someone said, like, being in the same room is not the same as being present.
Yeah.
Oh, that was
Like,
me.
yeah. Yes. And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. Like, I want to experience life. I don't want everything to be numb.
Mm.
I don't want to work just to have enough to feed my kids. Like, I want to be able to enjoy life. So we moved out here and started over. And there's so many barriers in the way. But coming here was the first time that it wasn't the military or parents fighting or some other trauma making me move.
Mm-hmm.
I moved here by choice.
Yeah. It's a decision you made.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Knoxville, Tennessee, one of the greatest places on earth. You guys live in South Knoxville, if I remember correctly.
We do.
Yeah.
And even that was like all on accident.
Look, I was a South Knoxville girl. I think I shared that with you the first time we met for my first 13 years here. So for us to move to Hardin Valley was a big decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we just love it. We wanted to move somewhere that could be family friendly, that was business friendly, that had enough to do. And something that has been really important for my life is like inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go somewhere that my family, my mixed blended family with siblings that don't look like me,
Yeah.
but they're mine. Like, we need to be able to go out in public. But I lived other places that were filled with racism and bigotry where we would not have been allowed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Moving to such a conservative area it can be very challenging. At that time, I mentioned I had custody of my youngest sibling,
Yeah.
and they had come out in middle school. And so now I have
Here in Knoxville?
well, my husband and I were in California when we met
Yeah.
in the Navy. So it was out there. And it's a little bit of a different vibe, but
Yes.
moving to Knoxville, Tennessee with a Latino
Mm-hmm.
that came out as gay was like,
Yeah.
oh, we could face some really challenging moments here.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been beautiful. South Knox has been wonderful. During COVID, this beautiful woman named Jocelyn opened up a coffee shop, and it is focused on it's like a sober friendly space
That's awesome.
and inclusive to families and teens. And so then my youngest sibling had a place to go with their friends that were also out or at least accepting. And it's like,
Mhm.
okay, so now one of my children has a safe place to be.
Mm-hmm.
My little one was in preschool, and it was wonderful. It's like, okay, she is in a safe space. She's not experiencing the same things that we did of, malnutrition, neglect, trauma. And it's been really hard working with my husband on parenting, but there are so many things that it's like, I have to be steadfast in this. I cannot
Are we
allow
the same
these
person? Yeah.
Yes. I cannot allow this history to be repeated.
Mhm.
And nor can I allow it to be silenced.
Yes.
good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my husband and I, we talk about it often, and we grew up very differently. Both his parents, well-to-do family, quite the opposite. And so with MJ, I'm very intentional. I am ferocious about my son and protecting him. You said something earlier that really hit home for me about how trauma can shape us. So I remember a few years ago, I used to have anxiety attacks. Like I would lay down at night and I could not go to sleep. I was very restless and I just had trouble sleeping. I would start breathing heavy. Like it was bad. My brain wouldn't shut off. And when life started getting good after Aaron and I got married, I remember telling him, life is too good right now. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because I couldn't trust it. I was like, I'm not used to this. I'm used to stuff boom, boom, boom. And we know what hit later. And yet that's just how trauma feels. Like you never feel safe. Even when good stuff is constantly happening. When you're on a healing journey, it's just like you're so tense and you don't trust that the goodness is meant for you. So I'm happy you guys discovered Knoxville, Tennessee. How did you even find Knoxville? Let's go back a minute. Because from California to Knoxville, we talked about that with Natalie. They just randomly picked Tennessee and, thank God they picked Knoxville. How did you guys find us?
So it's really funny because a Facebook memory came up one time when my husband was deployed. Mm-hmm. And I said, maybe we should just move to Tennessee or Minnesota or something.
Minnesota.
And I was like, it was really random. It was several years ago. I'd never been to Tennessee when I said that. I was just like, okay, where's the most random place that we can think to get out of here? And my husband stayed in the military to retire. So he retired in 2018. But I had got out on medical discharge with physical disabilities and things in 2011. Mm-hmm. So I stayed in, went to college, worked some different jobs and other things. And it's like, okay, as soon as I graduate college and he's retired, we got to get out of here. Well, it was like a year difference because during college, I surprisingly got custody of my sibling that was going into 6th grade. And then I had my own kid. And so there was like, college ended up taking way longer. But when he was retiring, it's like, okay, where do we want to go? What do we need to do? What are the requirements? And it's like, okay, he wants to work for himself. Mm-hmm. He'd been in the military. We knew that we wanted to be in a place that, like climate-wise, was more reasonable. I mostly lived in Colorado, but I moved all over. And he grew up in Brooklyn. He's from Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Real rough, like rugged, mm-hmm. hard life before joining the Navy. And my life before joining the Navy was like both of us. The Navy was our way out.
You know what's not funny? I can't think of a better word. Serendipitous. So our episode 9 with Tara Jones, she talked about people that join the service to escape a tumultuous home life. And here you are, our very next guest, telling us why you and your husband both joined.
Yeah.
So just to that fact that, unfortunately, again, thank you to everyone that serves. A lot of our service members, they're joining to escape something and they need help the minute they join and not after. Mm-hmm. And even after, they
really need help.
Really need the most amount of help.
Yeah, and in that process, it's like, okay, well, our careers have led us this far. We both worked on weapon systems in the military, and that's a pretty high stress, high demand environment, deploying multiple times. I went on 2 deployments. My husband went on, I think, 7.
Wow.
Thank you for your service.
Yes.
Thanks. And there's so many things that go along with it that are beautiful, but also really hard.
Sure.
Moving to Tennessee is like, okay, we need to get Tennessee was not on the list, to be honest. Mm-hmm. We mostly talked about Florida, Texas, Virginia. He had got a job offer in Virginia. He got a job offer up at Bath, Maine, mm-hmm. where they build ships. He got a job out in like the middle of the desert by like Death Valley in California. And it was like, whew. And we're thinking, okay, tax-wise and everything else, California starts taxing your pension as soon as you become a state resident, which happens 30 days after retirement.
Wow.
So for, the rest of that time, he had been a non-resident. well, then they start taking his money. And he's like, I didn't even earn this here. So it's like, okay, we want good taxes. So then it was like Wyoming, Washington, Alaska. It was like, I've already lived in Wyoming.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back there. I don't want to live in Washington. I don't want to be in Alaska. Like, I don't want the cold. And so Tennessee kept coming up randomly. And then when my husband made the decision to purchase a franchise, he said, okay, I am a veteran. I want a franchise of something that I can do independently on my own and run it as like a one-man operation, or grow and have it be this like legacy, or, at least a stepping stone to the next thing. We had already owned 2 houses out in California. So he decided to purchase a business that offered a veteran incentive or like a discount. And when it came time to pick the area, they're like, okay, we operate in the US and Canada, and there's several places. My husband like narrowed it down to Tennessee, and we looked at Memphis and Nashville. And it's like both of those just had so many people and so many negatives associated. It was like, well, that's not really helping us get into a better lifestyle if we're going to have the same fears and concerns all the time. So we like, okay, well, maybe Chattanooga. And so he calls up the franchise owner and is like, I'll purchase a franchise in Chattanooga. And they said, nope, it's on lockdown.
Yeah, I knew that.
and we had already, like, we had looked at videos and YouTube, and we're like, okay, we had already made a decision, like that would be okay. And they said, well, that's not available, but Knoxville is. So we came out for a 3-day weekend, and we drove around all over. We stayed at a little train car Airbnb in Maryville. And then we stayed in the Sturchy Lofts in downtown on Gay Street. And it's like we had these 2 very different experiences, and we're driving around. And it's like, okay, well, let's drive up to Clinton. Oh, this is pretty. I could live here. Then we drive out somewhere else, like, oh, I could live here. And we're here in the middle of February. It was like record-breaking rainfalls that year.
2019. That's when my basement flooded, girl. You came at the worst time. Okay, continue.
So we're out here. It was the long weekend in February.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
And it was like, this is so beautiful. If this is
the worst season,
the worst of the worst.
I hate February for that reason.
We had a beautiful hike in the Smokies. We had a wonderful time walking down Gay Street. We went to the Westtown Mall. Like, we drove around all over. I was like, if this is the worst, imagine what it's like when it's great.
Oh gosh, I love your mentality. It's so true.
So on a whim, it's like, okay, we'll do it. So we signed the 5-year contract for the business. In May of 2019, I graduated. In June, my sibling finished up school, and we packed up our house and we moved. And we did a 26-day road trip camping in a van with 3 kids and a large dog. And yeah, it was just wild. But Knoxville, Tennessee kept coming up randomly. And it was like, worst case scenario, we give it a shot for 5 years, and if it's awful, just like the military, we'll go somewhere else.
It's a contract, yeah.
And last year with that business, we were ranked and voted in like the city view.
Oh, I saw, yeah.
And we got,
you can say what it is, by the way.
We got 3rd for a home inspection business against 2 businesses that have been in the area a very long time. And it's like here we are, like these little, like we knew one person who lives in Sneedville when we moved here.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let me tell you, we didn't mention this earlier. I know you were talking about reasons why to love Knoxville. My husband and I discovered when we were looking at places, because he had opportunities to move to like Spokane, Washington, and San Diego. And I was like, no.
How about no?
Knoxville's military community is so special, and we support each other. And you mentioned the discounts, with home inspections, it's a big thing. Like our client that we have under contract right now, I said, hey, you call them because they take care of you guys, and they will honor your service and give you an inspection for X amount of percent off.
Okay.
So when I first met you and your husband, I was so impressed. I was like, wait, she is a woman home inspector. I never had met that before. And you guys both being service members. It's like, how awesome is that? They're going to do fine. They'll do fine here.
Knoxville will support them, and you guys are both just so approachable and real. So I'm excited to know that you guys did place third in that polling. Because I saw your name, I was like, how cool they got nominated.
Yeah, and that's it. It's just wild to me because we literally knew nobody. We showed up, and you mentioned the military community. As a woman, there is a longstanding tradition of exclusion from several military organizations. Yet in the past few years, a lot of that has changed.
Yeah.
So when I got to Knoxville and we went and visited the American Legion, it's like, oh, we walk in and they were accepting of us. They were like, welcome in here. We're going to have dinner in a little bit. And I see there's one man with a new baby, like a brand new baby. And then I see another man there with a couple kids. And then another family comes in with kids. And it's like, okay, well, a military family, like I need an environment where I can be with my kids. My little one was 3. Is like she's still too little. Like if I can't go, or if she can't go, I can't go. And so it's like, okay, well, here we can be part of this community. And getting the business up and running for the franchise, my spouse had to do several like ride-alongs and like practice sessions. And so he did practice inspections for some of the Legion members. And then I stepped into a leadership role after a while. Like I started volunteering and showing up more and more. And then I stepped into a leadership role during COVID. And from there, I've been introduced to people all over. And so on this like path of healing, like I've experienced the VA. I did EMDR there. I've done several other sessions, and in Knoxville especially, they have the whole health program where it's considering all aspects. So dietary, lifestyle, stress reduction, pain relief, all these things. And it's like, okay, cool. And so it's like I found where I needed to be. And I just had to keep advocating for myself because of like medical issues, military, like limitations, the trauma, everything else is like, there's so much going on. I can't even function.
Yeah.
And like, that's a different person than you see or hear right now.
Sure.
Because it took a lot of work to overcome it.
You did the work. And I'm all for this person I see before me. I'm sure I would have appreciated the person you were, that you had to evolve into as well. You're impressive.
But it's just been so nice. And so in that community, I've been able to give back. I don't know if I have a second business as well that's like hair, skin, and wellness products. And the whole premise of the company is like building beautiful lives. And so when a few months after we got out here, I hosted an event where there were 2 dads that showed up and they had their daughters with them. And then, of course, my husband was there with our little one. And I taught them like basics of detangling hair, how to put in a ponytail, and how to do like a basic 3-strand braid.
That is cute.
And one of the veterans, he did that with his daughter. She was like a preteen at the time, like 11 or 12. And a few months later, he came back and he's like, I walked by the bathroom and she's in there like spritzing her hair and brushing it. And he's like, I just want you to know, like, thank you so much for giving us that moment to have that bond and experience in such a beautiful, meaningful way. Because he's like, I feel like I never got to be able to nurture and provide for my child in that manner.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's never too late to start restoring those bonds. And then last year I partnered with, there's a lady, she makes these little monsters. It's monsters made with love. And one of the things is like the first one you make, you have to keep for yourself. And so you're like, it's like mindfulness.
That. Yes.
Mindfulness with the self-love twist or something. She's wonderful, Lori Kay. And there's another guy out here, Jonathan Clark, that does poetry. So we did a veterans workshop last year. So we did a mindfulness session. So we did a haiku workshop with Jonathan, and then we sewed the little things with Lori. And it's just like out here, there's just so much in the community. I recently, my trauma therapist left the VA in July. Or in August. In July was our last session, and it was awful. So like here's this woman that I was able to like she knows all my ugly.
Yeah.
And she's been cheering me on with that, like, the tough love in the moments that I needed it, but also like the remember, like, you are awesome. Like, look at all you've achieved. Look at all you've overcome. And now you're here helping others. And so with everything that we do, it's like we want to help empower people. We want, like, even with the homes, like when someone's buying a home, they want that to be safe, and there's all these expectations, and it's like you got to start with the basics. And it's like if we can give people the power to be educated, informed, make those decisions, then they can make choices that give them a different life than they experienced growing up.
Yep.
And it's like if I can do that in every facet of my existence, as a veteran, as a mom, as a community member, as a businesswoman, as an entrepreneur, like that is beautiful to me.
Yeah.
But it's hard work, and it's been a long road to get here. And it's just like we just signed we're signing our next 5-year agreement for that business. And it's like, all right, well, Knoxville, we've been here a little like 4.5 years now, and I guess we're gonna stay for a little bit.
Well, our Scruffy City is better because of people like you.
Yeah.
We call it Maker City now, and I don't know if you're involved with the business owners downtown, like the Maker City thing, but it's just incredible the different people that are entrepreneurs here, and they come from so many different walks of lives, and it's just making our city so much better. So thank you for that. And I'll say that everything that you have to overcome, you've spoken to so many different people out there today. I won't even go into it because then I'm going to start crying again, and it's not even about me.
It's hard. It's hard because that's like there's so much more, and there's more.
Yeah,
trauma,
I know.
But there's more beauty too.
That's right.
Yeah, and like you saying, like you drive so many miles each way. Driving is my hobby, so for me, it's like
as a home inspector. Yeah, you drive everywhere.
Oh, you want me to drive out to some rural part and see a cool old barn? Okay, but most people, like, that's a huge commitment, and so there's something special about here that, for our family, it was like, okay, this is where we can kind of restart and allow the change to happen, and also be able to be present in the moment and enjoy the changes.
Enjoy it.
And that's like even harder. Yeah. Now I find myself going out and like I love to take little pictures and big pictures too, but like I'll try to find like a mushroom or a caterpillar or something. It's like if you can find joy in those small moments, like you just gotta find the next little one. Someone said something about glimmers before, and I just, that really stuck with me, because after having so many traumatic triggers and having like these moments that were just terrifying and just feeling completely overwhelmed, powerless, out of control. But then to find that, okay, in this moment, I have peace. In this little glimmer, there's a little glimmer of happiness. There's a little glimmer of peace. There's a little glimmer of hope. There's a little glimmer of kindness. It's like, okay, either find the next one or be the next one.
It's good.
And
we need more people like you.
Yeah,
oh my
sure.
gosh. Yeah, but we realize, we talked about this with Tara, it takes a generation like us of doing the work of healing to empower the next generation to make us all better as humans. It starts with one small change at a time.
Yeah.
But not even just the next generation, even the previous generation. The amount of times that we'll be having a family get together and my mother-in-law will say, wow, I would have got smacked for that. Or you wouldn't I would not have said that. Yeah. That would have not come out of my mouth as a child. Mm-hmm. Then it's like, but this is a different space. And to see, see like the previous generation learning and growing. And some people are just so stuck in their ways that there's no changing it. But some people, they're ready to let go of that hurt from, that they've been carrying for decades or half a century.
Yeah. Just because you've done something a long time, it doesn't make it right.
And
you say this all the time. The truth, what do you say? The truth will stand on its...
The truth can stand on its own 2 feet.
Yeah.
A friend of mine says that.
Yeah. And
do I know this friend? Do I need to know this friend? Should this friend be on the show? It sounds like.
You know, over the holidays, we traveled, and I was able to tell my husband, like, it's so weird to be in this space that holds so many painful, hard memories. Being around family members that have that history of the generational trauma. And we had Christmas with my aunt, who was my mom's middle sibling. She was my mom's older sibling, and we were talking, and it's like, how did you come to terms with your abuse? How did you forgive and have a relationship with your mother after the things that you went through? And so I was able to have some really healing conversations with her. And a few months before that, my mom's best friend came out, and I was talking to her, and she was like, I didn't know things were as bad at your house. She's like, I knew your stepdad was horrible because I could see how he was treating my best friend. But she's like, you know, the thing with abuse is that it gets so often swept under the rug and covered up. And we're at a point, like with the Me Too movement and everything else, like, we're not staying silent and passive.
Anymore. Yeah.
We're putting these things out in the open and letting other people who experienced it know that they're not alone, and that they can get through those hard moments too.
Yeah. And you said something I want to speak to, because I find myself still avoiding going home. I used to, when I was on my journey of healing and just accepting that I was different, because I avoid going home. And I want to tell our listeners that if you are in your season of where you're healing and you're trying to get to where Norita is, it's perfectly fine to avoid those spaces. If those people are triggers for you, if they're toxic,
Absolutely.
if they make you less of yourself, you have to dim your own little light. Avoid those spaces until you're ready to come back and visit, and then you can heal the previous generation and the next generation within your families. But it's perfectly okay to just be until you're ready.
Well, that's coming out here. We had a very big boundary, and we cut out a lot of, you know, even toxicity from friends and people that were close at one point. It's like we had to end a lot of those relationships because they weren't serving us anymore.
It's heartbreaking to do that.
It's horrible. But then at the same time, then you find your real people, the ones that you can call at 3 a.m. And it doesn't matter if they're around the world. They'll be like, all right, I'm on the next flight, you know?
Yes.
Or like, I'm just having a really, really tough moment, or I'm getting so in my head, or I'm regressing with these negative behaviors, and just having those people that you can talk with,
be real with,
They
honest
check
with.
you. Yeah.
and they check you. Yes. And that's
That-
in finding my trauma therapist, I had to find someone who was going to check me, but also hold that space and be that like solid, caring person. And that was the biggest thing. I went through so many different providers before I found a good fit. And that's something that's really hard, is like advocating for yourself and recognizing when something is not working. And it's so hard to say, especially to a human, like, I'm sorry, it's just not working out.
I had to do that with a counselor, and it was just like trying to get me to relive all this stuff and try to just come up with things to be upset about. And I'm just like, listen, this is where I draw the line. This is where I draw the line. I'm not going to sit here for 40 minutes and just try to think of something just because you think that there's something else that I'm not, that I'm not sharing. I know I'm open enough to share, that I'm not going to like hold anything back. So I was just like, this is the time that it's going to have to go. So, but it's hard. It's hard because it's, you're a counselor and you're not doing a good job.
Yeah. Well, hey, everybody's not for us, right?
Sure.
So that counts. While it's hard because, when we're fired, that dictates how much we make and provide for our families.
Sure.
And yet, if you're paying for a service, it better be a darn good what I need, right?
It better be what you need.
Yeah.
For sure. If it doesn't, and that's the thing, like it didn't serve, like it wasn't serving you. It was just another burden. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So
have you found someone else to replace your old grief counselor?
So she actually recommended that I join a peer support group and meet
Okay.
with a peer support person. And what I found most interesting with that is most positions, most jobs at the VA, the providers don't actually have to be a veteran, but for peer support they have to be.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, there's like a requirement that they have some sort of like adverse background, either like a trauma or a mental health diagnosis, addiction, something like that. And then their job is to help veterans going through that. And I was like, okay, I think I'm at a point where I was mostly going to see her like once a month just to kind of check in. And just because there's still, just because I've worked through a lot of the trauma before,
Yeah.
things still get
Brought up.
pulled up,
Yes.
especially with my child.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, now I have the skills, the tools, and everything else so that I can reflect and take a moment and, be calculated in my decisions. And so it's like, okay, I'm not at a point where I'm needing the trauma stuff all the time. I'm not having panic attacks all the time. I've found ways to make accommodations for me in terms of work hours, tools, other things like accessibility. I guess I don't need the trauma anymore. So I met with the peer support specialist and I was like, oh, okay, this is okay. And so I have the option. I can set up a one-to-one with him if needed, but we also have some different groups. And so there's a weekly online meeting group. So I've been doing that on Mondays and just chatting with other veterans. And they do like a coffee get together some weeks. And it's like, okay.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And so it's just been plugging in to the different parts of the community and, plugging in with the VA. And then it's cool because then through this group, I see someone that I met at this other veteran function.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then through this thing, I meet someone else. And then like one of the veteran events that we went to was Pints for Patriots.
Mhm.
That's run by one of the local nonprofits that that helps with service dogs and so many other things. And they just have all these get-togethers. And that's actually where I met Brittany.
Yes, yeah.
And-
the owners of that bar is like my
Yeah.
husband's work mom. We love
Yeah.
her. Yeah, and her husband.
Yeah, and the bar that they held at. So the
Mhm.
Chatterbox is veteran owned. And so the other organization had set up there for this event. And it was really funny because my husband was like, I know her. And I was like, I don't know who that is. And he started talking to Brittany and it was like, oh, this is a local realtor. Oh, her husband's on active duty. And we just started chatting for a few minutes. I was like, oh, cool. And this community in Knoxville is just bizarre. It's so connected. We go to a veterans event and you have like the county mayor there,
yeah.
Mayor Jacobs, and then you go to this other event and you got someone else, and then it's like it's wild.
It's wonderful. It's a great place to live. And I'm not just saying that because, I sell real estate, but truly we couldn't think of a better place to raise our family.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you today for sitting
Yeah.
with
Thank
us
you for coming.
and sharing your story. I know there was a lot to unpack, so thank you for revisiting
Yeah.
and your vulnerability. It will surely help someone else.
I even wore waterproof mascara.
You knew. I have it on as
I cried
well.
on the way in and I was like,
Oh. Thank you. I know that was a
Okay.
lot. You had she had her notepad, and I'm like, oh, I could tell she's nervous because it's so hard. When I told my story, there was stuff
Yeah.
that I had buried so deep that I forgot about. That's how our brain, we protect ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Our mind is great at that. I need to get me a trauma counselor too, but thank you.
Yeah,
It's
thank
very
you.
brave, very brave. And I want to end this episode by, you mentioned your friend who is there for you at the drop of the hat and just understands. So if we can all just name, not our spouse. Look, guys, yes, spouses, we love and appreciate you. You're our number one fan. I want us to all name that friend who is going to check you, love you in spite of you, knows you're ugly, and still sees the light in you. So I'll start with you, Gentry. Who's that
Start
friend?
with me, and I'm like,
Yeah, no, what?
oh, there's a couple of them. I have a
Okay,
couple
just
of
name 'em, just name 'em.
So Will's one of them,
Okay.
and then my friend Steven, and then my mentor, like spiritual grandfather, his name is Al, And I talked to him. I probably talked to him every day of my life for like 17 years. So he's in his 80s. He lives in Florida.
You're one of your best friends, an 80-year-old man. I love that for you.
He's so wise, and he's like done a lot. Like he's crazy. He's traveled 5.5 million miles playing the bass, and he's been very influential in music. So the music part of me gets him, but he saw something in me when I was 17 or 18. And as being in the tour circuit, in the national tour circuit, he saw something in me when I was just a worship leader from a youth group. And he joined, and when didn't have a bass player, and he joined and like kind of taught me and like brought me up that, and he's always encouraged me. And from someone who has that clout to pay attention to you, like it's always been special for me. So
yeah. I'll go next because if you're listening in, we're sitting in like a half moon circle. So I'm just going in order.
That's fine.
Okay. One friend, Sharon. We talked about Sharon earlier.
Yep.
You know Sharon just on the phone.
I know phone Sharon.
Sharon she's that friend. She was there. She was one of the only friends that knew when I was diagnosed with cancer. She was there. Food, meals. MJ loves her. I mean, put up my Christmas tree because I was so tired from the surgery I had this past December. She will pray for you, throat punch someone, remind you who you are, just real and raw and honest. I love you, Sharon. And my other best friend I met the very first day I started in real estate in 2017, Andrew. We actually share the same birthday.
All right.
And he has a lot of Andrew and I are very much kindred spirits. I talk to him every single day. He's my sounding board. He's my saving grace in spite of myself sometimes. When I want to set fire to the rain, he's literally like, but Britt, have you thought of it this way? And I'm like, I'm going to call Sharon. No. Andrew, I love you. And my other friends that I've been friends with since middle school, we all grown up, we're wife mothers and all that together. Y'all are special too, but this is all about Sharon and Andrew. Thank you guys for being those friends for me.
Yeah. And I have a few.
Shout them out, girl.
Yeah, my longest friend is Laura. Her family became the godparents to my youngest two siblings. And so I've known her since I was 6. But we've often been separated, but she knows like all the ugly. And it's really interesting. She was going through some relationship things in a season before I was. Mm-hmm. And so she was able to help me through some relationship struggles. And I was going through my trauma healing and unpacking and processing before she was. And so we've kind of like flipped roles. So she's been my longest friend since I was 6. My friend Becky, I met in 4th grade, and she was also bumped up to 5th grade with me. And so we just had this really unique experience. Her mom was very eccentric and my mom's best friend. And so we got to spend time together, but then she moved to her dad's. And so we would only see each other like on a Christmas break or summer break when she was visiting her mom. And so we've always had this like scattered friendship. And then in the Navy, Amanda is one of my best friends. And so it's like I have these few people and now they're like scattered all over.
Yeah.
At one point, like we were all close together, but I can call on them at any time. Yeah. And then from my family, like my mom's best friend from cosmetology school, she's my bonus aunt. Mm-hmm. And I have like a whole bonus family of like adopted family from the military. And it's finding those people that you can lean on and call on. It's beautiful. So even out here, like I've been finding those gems here, like the friend that you can call like, oh, things are so ugly. It's just awful. And like, it's really not. And especially the ones that not only call you on your stuff, you said like, tell you who you are.
Yes.
They remind you of who you are. Won't let you forget it.
And that's been the biggest thing. 'Cause even with my partner, there's some things that our partner just cannot do for us.
Absolutely.
There's some space that they just cannot hold for us. Mm-hmm. And if we got to find that out there. So,
well, hey, this has been a great episode 10, and I want to send out a challenge to everyone out there listening. Yeah. I hope you guys find your tribe that you love on your tribe. And if you will do me a favor, tag your tribe in the comment section. Show them some love. Let them know why they're special and why they hold that space in your heart. Until next time, friends.
Until next time.